Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rudy's 1/6 World for another First Thoughts video. And I know this one is about a day late, but work and life got in the way. But I did want to add in my 2 cents to the ongoing conversation on what I think was a very surprising Hot Toys announcement. And that is the Bat Armory from The Dark Knight Rises with the Bruce Wayne figure. Although, as we'll see, it really is more of a statue. So to start, I was surprised about this one, as I think a lot of people were. The Bat Armory was teased almost 10 years ago at San Diego Comic-Con, and after that it was relegated to the vault of unreleased prototypes. Although, if you look at the teaser pictures for the DX-19, they did sneak in a shot with the Armory in the back. So even then, maybe we should have had a hint that this was potentially coming. So let's start with the pros on this piece. 1. The Armory itself looks beautiful. It has that very clean look from the movie, and they do mention this dew effect, which seems to be just a fancy way of saying that they made it look wet. Which, since this entire contraption emerges from underwater, makes sense. I do like the effect because I feel like it does add to the realism of the piece, and it doesn't just have this pristine, maybe too clear plastic or toyish look. So I appreciate that. Number 2, I like that it's all USB powered, so no pesky batteries, and I do think this piece is going to look great fully lit up like that. And number 3, the Batsuit. And I know this isn't without controversy, but you can't deny that the Batsuit looks to be improved from the DX-19. And if there's one thing I've noticed with these suits, with these Dark Knight suits, dating back from that original MMS-71 to the DX2 to the DX12 and the DX-19, each version has been a decent improvement over the one that came before. Although I will say the improvements in some regards are pretty subtle. And I don't think it's as dramatic as, say, the Iron Man Mark III 2.0 compared to that original, release or some of the original figures. So those have some vast improvements compared to what you're seeing here. So now we got to go to the cons. And first off, the sculpt. I might be in the minority here, but there's just something off about this one. I think this is an indication, though, that what we saw with the Jane Foster, the Shuri, and the Tom Holland sculpt previews is going to become more of the norm for Hot Toys. Here, the sculpt which Hot Toys says is completely new has a lot more detail to it, and even a slight sheen on the skin, maybe to represent some of the mist from the water around the Armory. But I just don't see the likeness. I think it's there from certain angles. I think the hyper-realism is great, but I definitely think there's room for improvement here. And I do feel like the movable eye system, for some angles and some poses, does seem to make things a little more awkward. The second con, the Bruce Wayne figure, and if you could see me, I am doing air quotes here because Hot Toys clearly indicates this is a non-articulated body. It's not a figure, right? It's a statue. And you can even see that with the arms in particular where the hand touches sort of the bicep or the forearm. If you zoom in, it's all sculpted together, and it does create this beautiful look for the cross arm look that looks very, very real, but it feels much more like mixed media, like a 6-scale version of a premium format statue. Now, like I said, don't get me wrong, I think the body looks well done. I think everything is amazingly sculpted here, but it is a statue, and frankly, for me, when I collect figures, I want to pose them up. I know some of you might say, yeah, but this is the pose you would want anyway, right? And I would agree, but I still like the ability to come in and change things up a little bit. I think if anything, they could have made this a posable figure with swap-out arms to recreate this particular look. That's just my 2 cents on it. And number 3, the Batsuit. And I know I mentioned this in the positives, but it's also a con here. And the reason is because there is controversy here, given that the DX-19 was just recently released. So it does feel like they could have tried to incorporate some of these improvements into that figure that they teased and released earlier on. So it's more a question of what's going on with the decision-making process that Hot Toys has here. So for me, it's an interesting release, but not something I'll be picking up. And before you think I'm a Marvel fanboy, like many of you, I do love the Dark Knight trilogy. It was and still remains one of the best trilogies for me in the superhero genre. And I do own most of those original figures that were released, including that original MMS-71, that original DX2 and DX12. Not to mention a bunch of the Joker figures, plus that original Batpod and Tumbler. I do think, looking at the two armories from the Dark Knights and the Dark Knight Rises, I prefer the one from the Dark Knight. Just visually, I always found that one more appealing. And even for me, I had to pass on that one just because of the size. So this is going to be the same. I have way too many other things on pre-orders, with a lot more coming on the horizon. But what's interesting to me is that Hot Toys continues to revisit these lines. And it's basically the Dark Knight and Iron Man. And obviously they're big cash cows for them. And I'm just curious about what the discussions are behind the scenes. Is it we need to keep the license, so we want to keep releasing figures? Do they do this to make up for low selling stock elsewhere? I can't blame them. Just seems curious to me, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it, you know? What I will give them is this. I'm seeing some forward movement from them. There's some evolution and innovation coming in from Hot Toys. Do I think this has anything to do with in-art? Maybe. I think what we're going to see here going forward is more sculpts of this higher detail caliber. We already know the moving eye system is now becoming a standard for all these. So throw in the hyper real sculpt details, and they're definitely trying to elevate their products, which I think is a big plus. Now, while I listed the statue that this comes with as a con, I will give Hot Toys credit for trying something different. And the piece does look great. It's just not what I look for in these pieces that I collect. But I can't deny how good it looks. So I appreciate that Hot Toys is changing up their thinking again and trying new things. Now, for those of you with the DX19, yeah, it sucks that there's a new and improved suit coming out so quickly. But I wouldn't rush to get rid of your figures. Look at me, for example. I still have that original version, which is seriously outdated. But the DX02 with the flight pack from that Hong Kong scene and the DX12 from the Dark Knight Rises, I still think hold up pretty well. I can see the improvements in these new versions, but I just didn't see enough of it for me to get rid of those versions. And let's face it, from a time frame, this won't be released for at least another year or longer depending on delays. And look at the price point. $565 plus taxes and shipping. So it's not something to be just nonchalant about and say, I'm going to get rid of my DX19 and get this. I think if you're a huge fan of the movies and this is the focus of your collection, it could definitely be a piece for you. The Nolan trilogy can stand nicely on its own, away from all the current craziness with Warner Brothers and the DCU. And I know I love my collection, but I did cut myself off from having a lot of repeat versions of this version of Batman, since the suits aren't dramatically different from one movie to the next, or from one release to the next. I will say one thing though. I'm convinced now more than ever that Hot Toys is at some point going to be releasing a new Joker. They've done a Bane 2.0, a Catwoman 2.0, two new Batman from The Dark Knight and from Dark Knight Rises. I think it's only a matter of time, and I'll be very interested to see what that piece would look like. So that was a quick first thoughts video, and there really is a lot to think about with this piece. So let me know what you think, and if you're enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll touch base on the next video.